Hello, my name is Ahmed Al-Nisser, and today I'll be talking about Indigenous involvement in films and TV. Erased and misrepresented Indigenous voices in film and TV. For a long time, Indigenous people were either left out of movies and shows or shown in very inaccurate, harmful ways. Most of the time, these roles were created by non-Indigenous writers and directors. They didn't care about the truth. Instead, they used stereotypes like the noble savage, the drunken warrior, or the sidekick, roles that had nothing to do with real Indigenous lives. These fake images created false ideas about Indigenous people and helped spread racism and misunderstanding. The bigger issue isn't just about being excluded, it's about being shown in ways that damage how others see Indigenous people and how Indigenous youth see themselves. That's why misrepresentation in media is an injustice that still affects people today. Who, what, when, where, and why? Let's break this down. Who? Indigenous filmmakers like Denny Scoulette, who was Cree Métis, Tracy Deer, who was Mohawk, and Mary Clements, who was Métis. These women are powerful storytellers who use film to speak the truth about Indigenous lives. What? They're making films and TV shows that reflect their communities, stories about the past, present, and future of Indigenous people. When? Indigenous resistance in media has always existed in some form, but it started growing in the 1990s and really took off in the last 10 years with more support and visibility. Where? All across Canada, in First Nations, Métis, and Inuit communities, and on mainstream platforms like CBC and Netflix. Why? Because for too long, Indigenous people have had to watch stories about them, not by them. These filmmakers are changing that by telling their own truths and building pride in their culture. The impact of misrepresentation. Why does representation matter so much, you might ask? Because media shapes how we see the world and how we see ourselves. When Indigenous youth don't see people like themselves in movies or shows, or only see themselves shown as victims, criminals, or stereotypes, it can change and hurt their confidence and pride. It can make them feel invisible or like as if their culture doesn't even matter. Danny Scollett once said her film about residential schools was rejected for being not relevant. That's a clear example of how the industry often ignores Indigenous truth. But Indigenous filmmakers are pushing back. The docuseries First Contact is one powerful example. It brings non-Indigenous Canadians face to face with Indigenous communities, breaking down harmful myths and showing the truth. It helps viewers unlearn racism by replacing stereotypes with real lived experiences. Another example is Club Native by Tracy Deer. It explores how blood quantum laws affect Mohawk identity and belonging. It's deeply personal and powerful. And it challenges the systems that divide Indigenous communities from the inside. These stories matter because they show how Indigenous people are real, complex human beings. They correct false ideas, inspire conversation, and help young Indigenous people feel proud of who they are. Indigenous empowerment through film and action. There's a real movement happening in Indigenous film and media. Projects like the docu-series First Contact are changing the way people understand Indigenous communities. In the show, non-Indigenous Canadians spend time in First Nations communities and face the truth about racism, stereotypes, and history. It challenges viewers to question what they've been taught and opens up space for learning and change. Tracy Deer's film Club Native looks at identity and belonging in her Mohawk community. It's a personal story about the effects of blood quantum rules and laws that decide who is considered Indigenous. The film shows how colonial systems still divide people today, even with their own communities. Both First Contact and Club Native give space for Indigenous voices to be heard uncensored. They help others understand what Indigenous people actually face, not just what's shown in the media. So, what can you do? You can watch Indigenous made films and documentaries like these, talk about them with your friends, your teacher, your family, share them on social media. Ask for more Indigenous content in your schools, on streaming platforms, and in the news. Most of all, support Indigenous creators by listening, learning, and standing with their stories. Thank you so much for listening. These are my works cited.